The
We
knocking
have
came
to
at
leave
exactly
now.
midnight.
But why? I don't understand.
3 sharp
There's no
raps
time.
that cut
Come
through
on.
the silence of my apartment like gunshots. I wasn't asleep. Insomnia had become my faithful companion these past few months, but I wasn't expecting anyone either. Especially not her. Not after everything that had happened. When I opened the door, Ellie stood there in the rain, mascara streaking down her face, clothes soaked through, shivering. Her eyes, always so confident and bright, looked hollow. Defeated. "Can I stay over tonight?" she whispered, her voice breaking on the last word. I didn't hesitate. I pulled her inside. What I didn't know then was that this midnight visit would change both our lives forever, revealing secrets we'd kept buried for years and testing the boundaries of what true friendship really means. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real, raw stories about friendship, betrayal, and redemption. Your support means everything to this channel. I'd known Ellie Simmons since we were 7 years old, back when we both had missing front teeth and matching butterfly clips in our hair. We'd been inseparable through elementary school, awkward middle school years, the drama of high school, and the chaos of college. But the last 6 months had torn a chasm between us that I thought was unbridgeable. As I handed her a towel and some dry clothes, an old university sweatshirt and sweatpants that had always been her favorite to steal, I studied her face. The sharp angles of her cheekbones seemed more pronounced, her collarbone too visible beneath her wet shirt. She'd lost weight. A lot of it. "Thanks, Maya," she said, taking the clothes with trembling hands. "I'm sorry for showing up like this. I didn't know where else to go. 6 months ago, I would have said she could always come to me. That my door would always be open. But that was before the betrayal, before I discovered the lies, before the screaming match that ended with both of us saying things we couldn't take back." "It's fine," I said, the words sounding stiff even to my own ears. "The bathroom's still in the same place." While Ellie changed, I made tea, chamomile with honey, the way she'd always liked it. My hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over despite the months of silence between us. I placed the steaming mug on the coffee table just as she emerged from the bathroom. She looked smaller somehow, drowning in my clothes, her wet hair pulled into a messy bun. Without makeup, the dark circles under her eyes were impossible to miss. Something was very wrong. "You want to tell me what happened?" I asked, gesturing for her to sit on the couch. Ellie wrapped her hands around the mug, staring down at the tea as if it might offer answers. "Daniel kicked me out," she finally said. "Daniel." Her fiancé. The reason for our falling out. "He did what?" Despite everything, anger flared in my chest. "Why?" Ellie's laugh was hollow, devoid of any humor. "Turns out you were right about him all along." She looked up at me, tears forming again. "He's been cheating. 4 months. With his ex. And when I confronted him tonight, he..." She trailed off, her hand unconsciously moving to her wrist, which I now noticed was ringed with finger-shaped bruises. The room seemed to tilt sideways. "He put his hands on you?" She nodded once, quickly, as if acknowledging it might break her. "It's not the first time." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. My mind raced back to our fight 6 months ago. I'd told her Daniel was wrong for her, that something about him didn't sit right with me. She'd accused me of jealousy, of trying to sabotage her happiness because my own love life was a disaster. We'd both said horrible things. And then silence. 6 months of it. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Pride. Shame. Fear." She shrugged, wiping away a tear. "I couldn't face you after everything. Couldn't admit you were right. By the time I realized how bad it had gotten, it felt too late to reach out." I moved to sit beside her, close but not touching. "It's never too late, Elle. Never. That night, we talked until dawn broke through my apartment windows. She told me everything, how Daniel's controlling behavior had started with small things. Checking her phone. Making comments about her clothes. Gradually isolating her from friends. Then came the criticism, the put-downs, the occasional shove that he always apologized for afterward. Classic abuse pattern, escalating over time. I kept thinking I could fix it, she said, her eyes red from crying. That if I just tried harder, loved him more, he'd go back to being the man I fell for. I listened, fighting back my own tears. How had I not seen this? How had I let my hurt feelings keep me from checking on her? I should have been there, I said finally. I should have reached out. Ellie shook her head. We both made mistakes. But you're here now. You let me in tonight when you had every reason not to. As the first light of morning filtered through the blinds, casting stripes across Ellie's exhausted face, I made her a promise. You can stay here as long as you need. We'll figure this out together. She fell asleep on my couch, curled up like a child, the weight of her secrets finally shared. I covered her with a blanket and sat in the armchair across from her, keeping watch. My mind was racing, planning our next steps, thinking about restraining orders and safe houses and how to help her rebuild. What I didn't realize then was that helping Ellie escape Daniel's control was just the beginning. The real journey, for both of us, would be learning to trust again. Learning to recognize our own worth. Learning that sometimes the deepest wounds come from the people we love most, but so does the most profound healing. In the weeks that followed, Ellie moved in permanently. We fell back into our old rhythms, morning coffee rituals, late-night movie marathons, inside jokes that no one else understood. But beneath the surface familiarity, everything had changed. We were different people now, shaped by our experiences, more cautious but also more honest. Daniel didn't go quietly. There were threatening texts, middle-of-the-night phone calls, one terrifying encounter in the grocery store parking lot that led to our first police report. Each time, Ellie flinched but stood her ground. I watched her rediscover her strength day by day, small victories accumulating like stones forming a path out of darkness. I keep thinking about all the women who don't have a friend to turn to, she said one evening as we sat on my tiny balcony, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sunset. What happens to them? The question lingered between us, unanswerable and heartbreaking. But it sparked something, an idea that would eventually transform both our lives. 3 months after that midnight knock, we launched a support group at the local community center. Just a few chairs in a circle at first, flyers posted in women's bathrooms at libraries and cafes. Rebuilding after relationship trauma, we called it. A safe space for sharing stories, resources, and hope. The first meeting, only 2 women showed up. The second, 5. By the 3rd month, we needed a bigger room. Ellie's journey from victim to survivor to advocate was messy and nonlinear. There were nightmares, panic attacks, days when getting out of bed felt impossible. But there were also breakthroughs, the first time she laughed without immediately covering her mouth, a habit Daniel had criticized, the day she deleted all the apology drafts in her phone notes, the morning she looked in the mirror and said, "I like who I'm becoming." My own journey was quieter but equally profound. I learned about the complexity of abuse, how intelligent, strong women can become entrapped. I confronted my own guilt for missing the signs and abandoning my friend when she needed me most. And I recognized patterns in my past relationships that suddenly made sense through this new lens of understanding. 6 months after Ellie knocked on my door, our support group had evolved into a full-fledged nonprofit organization. We called it Midnight Knock, a name that made Ellie smile every time she heard it. From the worst night of my life to the best decision I ever made, she'd say. We secured a small grant to provide emergency housing vouchers for women fleeing dangerous situations. We partnered with local attorneys offering pro bono services for restraining orders and divorce proceedings. We created a network of volunteers to accompany women to court dates, job interviews, apartment viewings, all the places where having someone by your side makes all the difference. Daniel eventually moved away, but not before making one last attempt to win Ellie back. He showed up at our apartment with flowers and tears and promises to change. 3 years earlier, she might have believed him. 6 months earlier, she might have been tempted. But standing in our doorway, she looked at him with clear eyes. "I wish you healing," she said, "but not at my expense." Then she closed the door. That night, as we sat cross-legged on the living room floor eating takeout, she said something I'll never forget. "You know what's strange? I'm actually grateful for what happened." I nearly choked on my pad thai. Grateful? For Daniel? She shook her head. Not for him. For the experience. For what it taught me about myself. For how it brought us back together. For Midnight Knock and all the women we're helping. She reached for my hand. If I hadn't hit rock bottom that night, I might never have found my purpose. As our organization grew, so did we. Ellie went back to school for a degree in social work. I used my marketing background to raise awareness about domestic violence, creating campaigns that challenged stereotypes and emphasized early warning signs. We both started dating again, cautiously, mindfully, with clear boundaries and open communication. 1 year after that Midnight Knock, we held a fundraising gala for Midnight Knock. Standing at the podium, looking out at a room full of survivors, supporters, and community leaders, Ellie began with words that sent chills down my spine. 1 year ago, I knocked on my best friend's door at midnight and asked if I could stay over. What I was really asking was, will you still love me after I've lost myself? Will you help me find my way back? Will you believe in me when I can't believe in myself? She looked at me, tears shining in her eyes but a smile on her face, a real smile that reached all the way to those eyes that weren't hollow anymore. What I've learned since then is that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is ask for help. And sometimes the most important thing we can do is answer the door when someone knocks. The journey wasn't over, of course. Recovery isn't a straight line, and healing doesn't happen in neat, cinematic montages. There were still hard days. There always would be. But we faced them together, with a growing community of fierce, resilient women walking alongside us. 2 years after that Midnight Knock had helped over 300 women reclaim their lives. Ellie had graduated with honors and was working as a victim advocate in the district attorney's office. I had published a book about recognizing the early signs of emotional abuse, with all proceeds going to our organization. And on particularly difficult nights, when the weight of the work felt too heavy or when one of us was triggered by a memory or a setback, we'd make chamomile tea with honey, wrap ourselves in blankets, and remind each other how far we'd come. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't knocked that night? Ellie asked once. All the time, I admitted. Or what if I hadn't answered? The questions had no answers, but they didn't need them. What mattered was that she had knocked, I had answered, and in that moment of courage and compassion, something broken had begun to heal. 5 years after that Midnight Knock, I stood beside Ellie as her maid of honor. Her new husband was nothing like Daniel, kind, supportive, someone who celebrated her strength rather than trying to diminish it. During my toast, I told the story of that rainy midnight, watching tears and smiles spread across the faces of everyone who had been part of our journey. To knocking on doors, I said, raising my glass. To answering them. And to the brave, beautiful souls who find their way back to themselves, one step at a time. That night, after the last guests had gone and Ellie was getting ready to leave for her honeymoon, she hugged me tightly. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. Always, I promised. And I meant it. What I've learned through this journey with Ellie is that the deepest friendships aren't the ones that never face challenges. They're the ones that survive them. They're the midnight knocks and the open doors. They're the hard conversations and the healing that follows. True friendship is holding space for someone when they're broken, believing in them when they can't believe in themselves, and walking beside them as they rebuild, not into who they were before, but into someone stronger, wiser, more authentic. And sometimes, the most important chapters of our lives begin in the darkest hours, with a simple question: can I stay over tonight? The answer, always, should be yes. If this story touched you, please remember to like and subscribe to this channel for more stories of healing, hope, and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Your support helps these stories reach those who might need them most. And remember, if you or someone you know is experiencing relationship abuse, help is available. You are not alone, and it's never too late to knock on a new door.